with you again, and just thank everybody for your looking at our podcast past couple of weeks and the good response we've had from that. So we just encourage you to continue to join us, and we're glad that you do. Again, here with Adam, and going to be looking at a couple of points from this past Sunday's sermon. So we'll jump right into that, Adam, and in Matthew 17, the Transfiguration, looking at a couple of points from that chapter. So we'll let you jump right into it.
Yeah, as we talked about yesterday, can you imagine being there and, knowing that this is a foretaste of the fact that we are going to be there for all who are believers? I mean, what an incredible thought. Yeah, just wanted to pick up, kind of think about a couple things that we talked about yesterday. We won't go through the entire sermon, but, we really hit on this idea of glory. The glory of Jesus, the glory of God, which is what the disciples were seeing here up on this Mount of Transfiguration. And we talked about the fact that it's hard to define glory. Even the scriptures, we know it means weightiness. We know that it means, somebody that throws their weight around that carries importance and influence. But no real definition. I mean, the scriptures use a variety of different ways to talk about glory, the glory of God. And so I just thought you and I would kind of banter back and forth for a few moments, and maybe the folks at home, as we think through just how glorious God is, how glorious Jesus is, and what that means. Yesterday we used the illustration. I had some folks come up in both of the services, and they held out the palm of their hand and poured some water to see how much water they could hold. And, we got home, and one of my boys looked at me and said, Dad said they didn't pass the test. I said they weren't supposed to pass the test, son. It was part of it. And so the fact they couldn't hold a whole lot of water, and then, the passage in the scripture in Isaiah chapter 40, verse 12, where it says that God holds all of the waters. And you think about how much water covers just the face of the earth, and that God holds all of it in the palm of his hand.
Yeah.
That's glory. That's
right.
That's vastness. That's infinite. I was thinking about some of the other things that the Bible talks about to kind of describe the glory of God, and just things that kind of boggle the mind. And one of mine was that came to mind thinking through this. He knows how many hairs are on our heads.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you think about the number of hairs, and
Mm-hmm.
when a hair is cut or when a hair falls out, very finite. And you think about the hairs on your head, and in your case, the hairs on your face, and that he knows the number of hairs on each of our head. And then you think about the number of people in all of the world and the number of hairs on their head, and he knows them all. And it's mind-boggling.
Yeah.
It's mind-boggling. Anything come to mind
Well,
for you?
Yeah, I mean, Amy and I have just gotten back from vacation, and we were on a plane flying over the Pacific Ocean,
Mm-hmm.
and we flew at night, and it was a full moon.
Yep.
The sun, the moon was just beaming down on the ocean, and I just for a long time just sat there looking out the window, because you could just see the water, and it was just amazing. It's just like, this is so big, and I am so insignificant to all of this.
Well, and you're flying 500 miles an hour.
Yeah.
And it doesn't feel like the moon's moving,
right?
Because it's so vast.
But just talking about the water,
Yeah.
holding the water, and like it just looking at that and how big it is, and then plus, of course, when we got over land, and
How big
you start going over seeing lakes and rivers and all that. So yeah.
Well, and you and I had talked a little bit since you've been back, and I had the opportunity a few years ago to go to Hawaii, and this statement that you made and that I made, and we talked a little bit about it. Pictures cannot do justice to what you see.
No, not at all.
And I in a way, that's kind of a metaphor to what we're talking about.
Yeah.
God gives us all of these pictures. We have these words on the page of Jesus' transfiguration, that he is showing his infinite glory in this moment to these three disciples, and even that, there's not words for it.
Mm-hmm.
You was talking about the moon. I believe it's Psalm 147, verse 4. It says that God knows all of the stars, and he calls each of them by name. You think about a dark night, a clear night, when you're away from city lights, and you can really begin to see the sky and how many
Yeah.
stars are there that are just visible to our eye, and that doesn't include the ones that aren't visible to our eyes. And to think about all the stars that are out there, and God knows each of them by name. That's glory.
Yeah.
And so that's a little bit of a picture of what these disciples received when they saw Jesus in his glory. And it's a reminder for us of who created us, of who we're supposed to be serving, of who we're going to give an account to, who we're going to stand before one day. And when I think about standing before that glorious God, I am very well aware that I need that glorious Jesus, who at that point will have, the nail prints in his hand, and he will stand there and he will say, he's mine, and he's been forgiven because of what I've done. And so only a glorious Christ could serve as a suitable substitute before a glorious God in place of sinful men.
Yeah.
And when we think about glory, when we think about the nature of Jesus here, it ought to kind of wake us up to see that there's more. And yesterday we mentioned just briefly, and I think this came from Paul David Tripp. I was quoting him a little bit. So often our hearts and our minds, we settle for the lesser glories of this world, thinking that they're going to scratch that itch that God has placed within us. And it's only when we behold his glory and when we are captivated by the glory of Christ that all of these lesser glories that he's given us here on earth begin to make sense.
Yeah.
And then we begin to view them and use them in the appropriate way instead of abusing them and turning them into idols. And so we spent a lot of time talking about glory yesterday and what that means, this weightiness of God, and that he's the only one that can fill that hole within us. And then we also talked about the fact that Jesus is up on this Mount of Transfiguration with Moses and Elijah. And we kind of gave the reason why it was them, that was kind of the summation of the Old Testament, that everything had been pointing to Jesus. And in Luke chapter 9, which Luke tells the story of the Transfiguration like Matthew does here, but he adds in Luke that they were talking about Jesus' exodus, and this exodus that he's leading, of leading people out of sin, an even greater exodus than Moses had led when he led the people out of Egypt into the Promised Land. And we kind of got into yesterday that, I don't know whether Jesus needed it or not, but we know that he was also fully man as well as fully God. And so Jesus here, we know that he struggled and at times agonized over the fact that he was going to the cross. And you remember the scene in Gethsemane where Luke says that he was sweating as if great drops of blood because of the intense agony that he knows he's about to endure. And so we don't know whether he needed the encouragement to finish the task and the mission that God had sent him on. But whatever it was, they were talking about this. And I think that this was a source of encouragement to Jesus to hear Moses and Elijah basically saying, finish well. It's worth it. The joy that's set before you is worth it. And we talked a little bit about how, we have been given the mission of God as well, to be his ambassadors, to endure persecution, to be countercultural, to be in this world but not of this world. And as you begin to piece all of that together, that's a picture of walking faithfully in this world where it's so easy to kind of walk unfaithfully,
right,
and to make the wrong decisions and to set the wrong priorities. And for me, and I guess we'll get into this for just a moment, this is a picture of true accountability, that there is challenge, that there is encouragement, that, hey, I'm with you, the reminder that keep going. Keep going. This morning I read a quote from Herschel York. He's one of the professors up at Southern Seminary, and I've heard Brother Herschel preach quite often. And he gave a reminder today. He said, just keep plodding. Keep plodding day after day. Stay in your lane. Keep advancing, because the harvest will come in time after 1,000 unacknowledged simple acts of obedience. And, man, we need that.
Yeah, we do.
We need that. I think we live in a culture, not only is it a microwave society where everything, we want it instantly, but I think we live in a superstar culture. And everybody is looking, for the next big thing. And we want to live as superstars in the limelight. And what God's looking for is faithful servants.
Right.
He's looking for us to keep plodding along day by day. And so as we think about encouragement, as we think about biblical discipleship, biblical accountability, and what that looks like, let's talk for just a moment before we finish about the importance of that in the life of a believer, the life of a Jesus follower. You lead the men's ministry here at Glory Fellowship, and we break up into small groups. And part of that, I believe, is for encouragement.
It is.
Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, and just kind of on the big scale of things, that's why it's so important to show up to church and be a part of a local church family for that encouragement and that accountability to be with others and to be involved in as many things as you possibly can. We understand everybody can't be involved in everything, but to be involved in these things like the men's ministry, the women's ministry, and that's part of what that's for, and we break out into those small groups, and, it's 4, 5, 6 guys that'll be in each group, and we are talking about that lesson from that particular meeting, but it's also where they can get in there and you can talk about things that are going on in your life in relation to, what the lesson is about, and those guys can, encourage one another, and you don't feel like that you're on an island and you're the only person going through particular things, because you're not.
Yeah.
And so we need that encouragement from other believers to continue on and continue plodding through, like you were saying.
Yeah, this moves beyond the surface-based, just casual conversation, and how many of us need that? And perhaps today you're watching this podcast and you've got something going on in your life, and you recognize, man, I need encouragement to continue on. That this is not hopeless. This is not in vain. That this walk of faith and loving my kids well, and loving my husband well, and loving my neighbors well, loving my coworkers well, and encouraging them. It's not an easy thing. It can be very draining. And so I want to encourage you today. Keep plodding. Keep being faithful. And if there are some disciplines in your life that you need to start, I would encourage you to do that. If you need to make a renewed commitment to serve the Lord and be a part of the local church, I'd encourage you to do that. Be serious in that. But know that God is there with you, and that Jesus loves you, and that there's a whole church full of folks, local churches everywhere that want to love on you and encourage you to walk faithfully. And I would also ask you, who are you encouraging today? Who are you in some meaningful relationships with that you can speak in a lovingly blunt way to? That maybe you see some folks that are not walking in the way that they should, and just an area where you can go to them in a one-on-one way, not to publicize it, not to make a big public ordeal of it, but in love to go to somebody and encourage them, hey, let's walk faithfully in this area of life for the glory of God. And so as we think about the glory of God and we think about encouragement, that was two of the things that we talked about yesterday that came out of Matthew 17, and so I hope that this is beneficial to you and an encouragement to you. I also just want to make a couple of points. If you're watching this podcast during the first week of June here, we want to encourage you to be praying for our Brazil mission team. They leave June the 10th, going to be gone for about a week, doing some good work there with a partnership that we have in Balsamo, Brazil, and we've got 9 folks that are going to be going. And I know a lot of preparation has been done for that. And we also want to pray for the local vacation Bible schools that are happening here in early June in other sister churches throughout our county and around our state. Our VBS will be in mid-July, and so we've got some time before that. But, man, we're pulling and cheering for the other local churches here in our community who are doing VBS. And I know there's a lot of work and preparation and prayer that's gone into those. And so we are some of your biggest cheerleaders here at Glory. I've been praying for you, and we'll continue to pray that some good things will come out of some vacation Bible schools here in the county. Anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, you think about that, all the vacation Bible schools and all the churches in this county and all those kids that are going to hear the gospel this summer. And it's an awesome thing. And
some of those kids may come to Glory in mid-July as well and hear it again.
That's right.
Which would be good too.
And that's good too. So, yep. Well, all right. Well, we appreciate you being with us today, and hope again that this is impactful to you in your life. And we encourage you to continue to tune in each week. Coming up, we will have some episodes that will be focused on our missions here. And Adam mentioned the Brazil team that's going to be going, and we'll be talking with a couple of members from their team, and then also some of our members who head up mission trips to Uganda and Kenya. And so we'll just be focusing on the mission aspect here at Glory Fellowship. So thanks again for being with us.